The holidays are going to be here before you know it, and don't you want your pet looking and feeling awesome going into the holiday season and into the new year? Well, we've got you covered. Today, I'm sitting down with Julia Benning, lead grooming advisor for the Well Groomed Pet franchise, and she's a Fear-Free Certified Groomer, and we're going to answer your questions about getting your pets ready and more. We'll dive into tips for making a pet's first grooming a success and explore why well-groomed pets are healthy pets. And we're going to do it all so you're armed for this information just in time to make that appointment for the holiday season. Whether your pet's been to the groomers 100 times or whether it's their first trip, if you want your furry friend to look and feel their best, you're not going to want to miss this episode. Stay tuned. My guest today is Julia Benning. Julia is the lead grooming advisor for Well Groomed Pets, and she's a passionate pet care professional with more than 13 years of experience in the industry. Julia is a certified fear-free groomer, and her extensive training and education in pet health and wellness have earned her an impressive 100% 5-star client rating. I'm excited to have her here today to share her expert insights on grooming, but also how it connects to your pet's overall wellness. So Julia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm happy to be here.
I'm definitely glad to have you here, and I think this is perfect timing for everybody because not only are we going to talk about grooming and some general guidelines and really open people's eyes maybe a little bit more or open them completely to the fact that grooming does have such a big impact on an animal's health, but then also, everybody wants their pet to look great over the holidays, and I think sometimes we think about it at the last minute, kind of like getting our own hair done. And then guess what? The person that cuts your hair can't get you in until February of 2025. So you got to plan ahead. So it's good we're doing this when we're doing this. So one of the things that I think that I've heard from groomers is that there are a lot of things that people could be doing to help themselves when it comes to taking their pet to the groomer. Sometimes people complain about having a bad experience. They cut my pets too short. They shaved them down when I didn't really want that. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with what is the pet parent doing at home to maintain that grooming along the way. So what I was hoping to kick off with is if you could give us some tips of things that pet parents could be doing between groomings or even before they take their pet ever to a groomer to make everybody's life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely an important topic when we're talking about grooming here and especially like you said, in time for the holidays and things like that as well. So I think it kind of falls into two different categories here. There's the behavioral implications and then, the maintenance, right? The maintenance of the skin and coat. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about the behavioral side of things first and, what we can do to mentally prepare our pups for the experiences that they're going to be going through during the grooming session, right? There's, one of my favorite groomers, Karina Stanworthy, she likes to compare it to being abducted by an alien as the pet's experience of going to a dog groomer, right? I'm kind of taken away from my comfortable environment and I'm asked to endure things that I don't typically have to endure. And so it can be quite foreign for them. And so first of all, drawing an awareness to that fact that this is something that is out of the ordinary for our dogs, right? It's not part of their daily routine and having some empathy for that, right? Understanding that this is a little bit different for them. And so from there, what can we do to make it a little easier for them to understand? Now, a lot of that does have to do with your groomer, making sure that your groomer is educated on, fear-free handling techniques. And a lot of it does rely on what the groomer can do with your pet during the session. But there's so much that pet parents can do at home to help prepare their pet as well. So things like practicing brushing, practicing having their feet held or their face held and different things like this, that aren't normally part of a dog's everyday picture that they see, but we can kind of start introducing them to these things in an environment when they're comfortable at home with their pet parent. I will say there are some dogs who are, particularly reactive to having their feet touched and things like that. And so there is a way to go about desensitizing your pet to these things. We don't want to just, push them through it and force them to let me hold their paw. So if you're practicing these things with your pet at home, practicing brushing or having their face face held or their feet held, and you notice them struggling a lot, and it's something that's kind of increasing their distress, then I would recommend waiting. Maybe that's not something that you practice at home. Leave that to a groomer who's been, professionally trained or Fear-Free certified to help kind of desensitize them to that process. But most dogs, we can do a lot at home as the pet parent. They trust us, and, they might be a little uncomfortable. Hey, mom, I don't want you pulling on my paw right now. But we can usually kind of reason with them, maybe give them some treats, use some soothing words, and make it a positive experience for them. And keeping it really short and sweet too. This is like 5, maybe 10 minutes or so, once a day, a few times a week. It doesn't have to be anything super intensive, but just so that they start to understand the picture of what it looks like when someone comes to kind of pick up my paw, right? So from that behavioral standpoint, that's kind of a super important piece that the pet parents can help kind of create what that picture looks like for the pet at home.
Right. And doesn't it help if they start that early on? I mean, I would think just like any other, getting an animal used to a certain experience, a certain level of conditioning, a certain level of training, there's elements of all of those things in there. But if I start when my puppy is a puppy by touching their feet and associating that with positive things like getting, I hold your paw to the count of 2, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and I let it go and I give you a treat. And then maybe I make it a little bit longer as I go along versus expecting at 2 years old, I've never been groomed. I've never, had a bath except the water hose in the backyard in my face, and thinking that that's going to go well when you run to the groomer. And then you're mad when the groomer can't do what you need to get done. Well, you didn't do your part at home.
Yep, absolutely. Yes. And part of our responsibility as groomers is to be an advocate for the pet, right? We have to be the ones that are sharing with the pet parents, hey, look, your pup's really not comfortable with this. We're not going to push them any further, right? We have to be that advocate. So that's why you'll hear that from your groomers a lot. It is our responsibility to make sure that we're protecting the pet's well-being. And that extends to a mental well-being as well. But to answer your question, yes, of course, it's always better to start early. The earlier you can start the desensitizing, the better. But, I'm always against that saying of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? We see it even with rescue dogs. People adopt dogs that are adult dogs, and we have no idea what that pet's gone through in its life. Maybe it's been familiar with grooming. Maybe it's had terrible grooming experiences. Maybe it's never been groomed in its life, right? And we can still use the same tactics and the same methods to help desensitize to the grooming process and help them get more comfortable. So that's honestly one of my favorite parts, is when I have a rescue dog come in that's so sensitive, they're being screamed when you just go to touch them. And then over the months that I groom them, as they come back and we practice and I can show that pet that I respect their boundaries, I earn their trust. And, that first time that pet comes in, their haircut might not look perfect, but by the 3rd or 4th visit, that pet trusts me enough that I'm able to give the pet parent the perfect haircut that they love. And that's a really rewarding process. So of course it's important to start early, but it's also not an excuse not to start desensitizing as well. You can start this at any time, and it will help your pet with the grooming experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, that setting, that was actually, I was going to ask you about, not setting your expectations too high. I mean, it's going to depend on the scenarios. And I've seen these videos where somebody finds a dog on the streets, and of course, this is an extreme example, but, finds a dog on the streets, has to lure it to their car. The dog's terrified, just kind of like skulking around to the car. They pick it up, they put it in the car, and the next thing you know, they're throwing it in the bathtub. And I'm like, is that really? I mean, I get it. Like, we don't want to necessarily get our house inundated with fleas, but that's a lot for an animal to go through all of those experiences tumbled on top of each other. So now taking that and saying, okay, I just adopted this dog from the shelter 4 days before Thanksgiving, and I'm going to bring it to a new house. I'm going to, get it to the vet to get vaccinated. It's going to get neutered. All these things are going to happen to it, and then I'm going to run it to a groomer. Like, you have to expect that you're not going to necessarily be able to accomplish all of those things effectively for many pets, because they need more time to decompress and get used to their surroundings, if nothing else.
Absolutely. And the same goes for puppies as well. With the holidays around the corner, a lot of people are going to be bringing home puppies. And, it's really good to have realistic expectations and understand that this is going to be really scary for the puppy at first, and that the first grooming appointment, the whole goal should really be just having a positive first experience for the puppy. Now, I will say there are some puppies, just like with people, everybody's different. There are some puppies that might be so relaxed by the grooming process that I can give them the most beautiful haircut you've ever seen on their first time in the grooming salon. We do get those. So it does happen. But for the most part, you want to expect that first session, maybe we'll get to trim a little bit around the feet, maybe a little bit around the eyes, but you're not expecting a full body haircut out of your puppy's first grooming session. And so it is good to make sure that, especially if you have some specific expectations of what you want your pup to look like for the holidays, if you guys have some, holiday photo shoots coming up or family pictures, things like that, that you communicate that with your groomer early, like months in advance, so that if there's any prep work that needs to be done, either by the groomer or the pet parent, that you guys are working together as a team to work towards that goal.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, communication is such an important part of this process. And I would think, and this is terrible to admit, but I've never had a pet that I've taken to the groomer except for one. And it was a dog that I found when I was doing rescue, and I ended up adopting him. It was a foster fail kind of situation. And he did go to the groomer. But other than that, I don't have a lot of experience taking my pet to the groomer. But I've been on the other end of, helping groomers work on their communication skills and how do they respond when they get angry customers and things like that, to know that, that communication is such a two-way street. You have to let your groomer know this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And groomers have to be great communicators to say, I really would love to do that, but that's going to be a process that's going to take this amount of months to get your dog to that point. It's not going to happen in this visit. It's so important to set those expectations and have those conversations before, not after you hand over the dog. It's not one person's fault or the other. It's a two-way street for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of ties into the second half of your question of, what can people do to help prep their pets for grooming, the maintenance side of things, right? We kind of talked about the behavioral, but when it comes to the true skin and coat maintenance, that communication is just as important in those types of conversations as well. So things like matting. Matting is probably the number one kind of pain point between the pet parents and the groomers. It's really difficult for pet parents to understand why it is that we can't give them exactly what they want when their pet is matted, and being able to have the conversations and explain that to the pet parents is extremely important. And then, vice versa as well. It is extremely hard for us as a groomer to have a matted pet walk in and have a pet parent who tells us, I promise I brush them every day, right? It's our instinct as a groomer to be like, no, you don't. But I know plenty of pet parents who brush their dogs religiously and they still come in with mats and tangles. It's not a matter of a lack of care. It's a matter of a lot of people have dogs with difficult coats to maintain nowadays. And it's hard to, even if you're investing the time to have the right tools and the right methods and the consistency, it's tough on pet parents out there. So of course, the communication between the pet parent and the groomers is super important, but also we as groomers have to recognize that pet parents are doing their best with the information that they're provided as well. So it's up to us to kind of educate them. So things like regular brushing are extremely important to being able to have the type of groomer, the type of haircut that you want. Now, if you're one of those people where you like your dog nice and buzzed, super short, sure, maybe it's not as important to brush them quite as regularly. Of course, we still want to keep them mat and tangle free for their own comfort. But if you're not too worried about having a really long fluffy fur, not quite as big of a deal. But if you do want your dog to be fluffy, then brushing them every day is super important, and not just brushing them, for 5 minutes and kind of calling it a day. But what happens a lot of times when pet parents spend just a little bit of time brushing their dog is they will brush the top layer of the fur.
That's what I was going to ask you, because they don't brush those armpits. I know they don't.
Exactly. And I always like to play devil's advocate for the pet parent because I think they get a lot of heat. They catch a lot of heat, and sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's not. But you could spend 15 minutes brushing your dog from nose to tail, getting the armpits, and still be missing tangles. So because you're only using one brush, if you use a slicker brush, that's great. That's what we typically recommend for removing matting or dead undercoat, tangles, things like that. A slicker brush is a phenomenal tool for pet parents to use. But you have to check with a metal comb as well. If you don't go over the coat with a metal comb, that slicker brush might just brush all the way through. And then when you go through with the comb, you'll hit a tangle that you didn't know was there. And so that's indicating to you that you have to go back to that area. So again, even I could spend 15 minutes brushing a dog from nose to tail and getting the armpits and the ears and everything. And I could go back over with the comb and there's still tangles in there that I need to go back and brush out. So making sure that you're using the right tools and kind of checking your work is super important. And to your point, Amy, when you're brushing, there are areas that typically get more matting that we want to focus on that groomers often have to shave out. And that is the armpit areas, the ears, behind the ears, under the ears, a lot of times the base of the tail as well, and the tail itself. So those are areas that are kind of key matting areas that you want to double check. But step one, make sure you have a slicker brush and a comb. And I will always advocate as well for using some sort of scissoring spray or dematting spray, conditioning spray, leave-in conditioning spray. That type of product will help protect the integrity of the coat itself so that you're not breaking and damaging the coat as you're brushing them out. So it's super important for maintenance at home, and that's going to, help your groomer be able to give you the haircut that you want.
Yeah. And I think people need to be realistic with themselves too, as to how much are they willing to do. I mean, it's the same thing we talk about with all aspects of dog life, is it's all about fit. So like, I will be the first one to admit, I cannot tell you the last time any of my dogs have been brushed, which I want to talk about, because there's a lot of people, and I know it, and I still don't do what I need to do. But there's a lot of people that think, my dog's a lab, so it doesn't need to be brushed. And I know that it does. But I've got all these short-haired dogs. I don't brush them. But I know for a fact, like if I had a fluffy dog, it would be a matted mess, because I am honest enough with myself to know that I am not going to brush my dog every single day, just like I don't brush their teeth every single day. I'm a bad person, obviously.
I'm the same way, Amy, don't worry. That's why I got the dog that I got, because I knew I wouldn't be brushing it every single day.
That's right. So you've got to, you got to think about that when you think about, okay, either I'm going to have to do this myself in between, or I'm going to be taking if I decide that I want this higher maintenance animal as far as their coat or their teeth or whatever it might be, then I'm going to have to pay the groomer, and I'm going to have to go more frequently. It's not going to be something where I can just go at Christmas time kind of thing, or just go for the holidays and think that that's going to cover it, or once a quarter.
Yeah, you're not wrong, but unfortunately there is a lot of misinformation out there, particularly when it comes to our designer breeds, the doodles and anything with poodle mixes in it. I'm honestly not sure why, but for some reason there are a lot of doodle breeders out there that are deliberately misinforming their pet parents and people that purchase dogs from them. So we as groomers hear time and time again, the breeder told me I didn't need to brush him. The breeder told me he shouldn't have a haircut until he's a year old. And these are golden doodles and labradoodles and sheepadoodles and bernedoodles and all of those, right? I see it time and time again in the Facebook groomer groups that this pet parent was told not to take their dog to the groomer until it's a year old. So again, we have to be, kind of sympathetic with our pet parents who are doing their best and thought that they could handle this type of dog. And now they're kind of saddled with a dog that realistically needs to be seen by a groomer every 4 weeks for the rest of its life. And doodle grooming is not cheap, right? And there's a reason for that. When you have a dog that is partially a short hair breed or a medium hair breed mixed with a long hair breed, we get both of those coat types in this mysterious coat that pops up. And that's one of the reasons why doodle coats are so varied and so diverse. You never really know what you're going to get, but it's going to be more difficult than, even a standard poodle's curly coat, which has a lot of integrity to it and is very predictable, right? So you're absolutely right. Making sure that you're picking a dog that is a good fit for what you are willing to invest is super important. But unfortunately, there are some pet parents out there who, have been misinformed, and that's led them to be in a situation where, maybe they can't afford grooming every 4 weeks for a doodle. And so that's when you have to kind of pivot, work with your groomer on a haircut that is good for maintenance, but still leaves you with a pup that looks as cute as you want.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there are so many types of coats. You're limited in what you can do with them. I mean, if you've got a lab, it's only so much you're going to do there.
Exactly.
But if you've got a doodle or if you've got a poodle, I mean, there's so many, even Yorkies. Like I've always been a huge fan of the puppy cut on Yorkies. And so I don't think if I had a Yorkie, I would ever have one that had that long mop of fur, just because I like that look. But I also know it's lower maintenance too to keep that shorter cut. So, that's a good point, is understanding what you're getting into. I want to hit on that idea, or mistaken idea, that I have, and probably a lot of people have, that because my dog's got short hair, I don't need to go to a groomer. What are the health or other advantages that even a short-haired dog, maybe they're not going for a haircut, but there are other things that they can get done at a groomer that help them?
Yeah, absolutely. So all dogs should be bathed, technically speaking, if we want to go textbook level here, every 21 days. So that's the keratinization cycle of the skin. So it takes about 21 days. If you were to bathe your dog 21 days later, they've got dead skin cells sitting on them again, right? And so what can happen when the dog has dead skin cells and dead coat and things like that sitting on the skin is it can lead to bacterial infections and yeast infections, skin infections, things like that. So being able to remove the dead skin, any dirt and debris that's in there is really helpful for their skin and coat health from that perspective, right? But with short hair dogs, they have different types of hair, right? So you have the undercoat and you have the top coat. So when the undercoat is dying and just sitting on the skin, it's just going to stack up and stack up and stack up. And that's when we start to see those little tufts on, usually towards like the hindquarters on, huskies or labs, that you just pull out these little tufts, right? So there's fur like that that's sitting all along the base of the skin. It's not just in those little areas that we're seeing. And that's preventing the skin from being able to breathe. So in combination with having dead skin cells and dirt and debris, and it being kind of pushed down and impacted underneath that dead coat, that's really a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and things like that, and can lead to skin infections. It can also be something where maybe your pet never doesn't seem to have issues with that, but maybe they got a particular area that's bugging them. Maybe their hip is bugging them, or they got a bug bite or something like that. And if they go to start chewing on that area, having a healthy and clean skin is probably not going to cause many problems if they start chewing on it. Whereas if they're dirty, that's like a perfect breeding ground for hot spots. So
yeah, it's like having dirty hands and getting a cut.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. Yeah. So if your dog is, say they haven't been bathed in, 4 to 6 weeks or so, and they get one little spot that starts to get itchy, much more likely for that area to turn into a hot spot. Same thing for like your Labradors. Sure, you may think, they don't really need much grooming or things like that, but that coat is so thick that if that dog gets moist, whether they are, going for a swim as Labs do, or just taking a walk out in the rain, it's going to be so hard for that skin to dry. And yet again, it's just a feeding ground for bacteria and other types of infections. So it's really, really crucial for those reasons, but it also, we could have dry skin issues, and dry skin is so uncomfortable for our dogs as well. So if they get a little bit too dried out, they really need those oils replenished, and the only way to do that is with a bath. So those are just a couple of things that we typically see from short-coated dogs that don't get trips to the groomer very frequently. And of course, that is, leaving out their ear cleaning and their anal glands and their nails and all of those other things that are super important piece of what happens with your pet at the groomer, as opposed to grooming them at home.
Yeah. And I think, there's probably a lot of people listening that are thinking to themselves, well, I've got a lab and I can do that, or I've got a certain kind of dog and I can do that. But the question is, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it on a routine basis like that? And then you mentioned some key things there. The other elements of things that are going to happen at a groomer. Like, I worked for a veterinarian for 8 years, so I can do anal glands. But most people are like, not only can they not do it, they don't want anything to do with it. And it's understandable.
So, yes.
But yeah, or ear cleaning and knowing when there's an infection versus, just dirt in their ears, or whether somebody's got mites of some kind or whatever. I mean, that's all stuff that a good groomer would be able to identify and help you, at least bring it to your attention, so that if you have to go follow up with the veterinarian to get some ointment for the ears or whatever it might be, that they would notice that. So
yeah, absolutely. That whole concept is actually the brainchild and the birth of Well Groomed Pets. That's everything that we do at Well Groomed Pets. Is while your pet is here for grooming, it's an opportunity for us to be able to identify if there's any areas that your pet needs some support when it comes to wellness, right? So of course that's super crucial. That's another piece, that your groomer is an educated pet professional that is able to see things that you might not be able to see, and And we see our pets every day. We might not notice minute changes, right? But your groomer is
Right.
going to be able to notice those changes. So that's a huge piece of it. Absolutely the kind of extra layer of eyes and expertise on your dog, but also the extra level of training and tools, even just the tools, like you could give your Labrador the best bath in the world at home and that dog is squeaky clean, but you don't have a high velocity dryer that's going to blow all of their undercoat out at home. So that makes a huge difference. And we see it time and time again with the short coated dogs that do come in for grooming. They're like, I can do it at home, but it's just never the same. They'll even purchase our products and use them at home. And they're like, it still isn't the same. And so part of that is the tools that we have in the grooming salon as well that allow us to kind of create that product that's just a little bit, it's just a different level above what you can do at home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like the time I went to New Orleans and I went to Cafe Du Monde and was like, totally enamored by the coffee and the beignets and thought, oh, I'm just going to buy that coffee and make it home. I don't know. There's either some secret ingredient or some equipment because it's hard to recreate something when it's being created by a professional with the knowledge about how to do it right. And that's one of the, when we were first talking about getting together and doing this episode, I was like, oh, we've done a thing on grooming, but what was very intriguing to me was the concept. And I want to talk about that just a little bit more, that it really is about the wellness of the pet, not just about getting the pet's haircut. So I'm assuming that your average groomer doesn't have, do they get, when they go through their grooming training, do they get pet wellness, skin health, all of that stuff? Or is it about how to do haircuts? Or how does one even know if I'm going to a grooming shop, whether those people have any training at all? Are they just maybe learned on the job? Like how does that work as a consumer to make good choices?
Yeah, that's a great question. And unfortunately, this industry is quite unregulated, so there isn't an easy way to know. So there's a few different certifications that you can go by. When it comes to how the groomer has been trained on how to handle your pet, Fear-Free Certification I always recommend that people, if you can, find a groomer that is fear-free certified. And that's all about reducing fear, anxiety, and stress in the pets during their grooming sessions. The AKC Safe certification is another great one to look for as well. That is a level of certification showing that you know how to safely groom this pet and keep that pet safe while it's out of the care of its pet parent. So that's another one that's just kind of like a good base certification. But when it comes to how the groomers received their training, there's so many different certifications out there from different groups and different programs and things like that. Generally speaking, most of them teach how to perform these haircuts on these dogs, and they don't typically elaborate much on wellness. So most of the wellness information that the groomers receive is typically something that we learn on the job from seeing these dogs and saying, hey, this dog has this hot spot that's popping up in this one spot all the time. What's going on here? And then you learn, oh, he has arthritis in his joint right here. No wonder he's been licking this one specific spot. That's information for me that I'm going to apply moving forward. So for a lot of people, it is really experience related. And unfortunately, there's not like a system-wide certification for wellness in the industry. So that's one of the things that we're kind of trying to compensate for here at Well Groomed, is that if you come to a Well Groomed Pet salon, you know that the staff here have been trained on these different wellness attributes. So we actually have technology where there's a portal for our pet parents that tracks over 50 different wellness attributes. And those are behavioral, physiological, and physical. So things like weight, things like, their behavior, their anxiety, but also things like their ears. Is there discharge in their ears? Are their eyes cloudy? Are they displaying joint pain? There's, as I mentioned, over 50 different wellness attributes that we track. So that is the pillar of what we are trying to achieve at Well Groomed Pets, is not just beautiful haircuts, but being able to be an advocate again for the pet and supportive for the pet parents so that they have more information on how they can help their pets live their best lives. But when it comes to the industry overall, there's unfortunately not really like a particular program or certification that you can look for and see if your groomer has. It's more investigative and something that you would, have to have conversations about with that groomer.
Yeah. And again, I'm not a client of or extensive experience in any way working with groomers, but I would think if I am going to a grooming establishment and there is an extensive wellness form that I fill out for my pet, like that would be a good thing versus what I experienced, and again, this was a long time ago, one time experience, was the only thing that they wanted to know about the dog was whether he had his rabies vaccine, which then led me to go run to a vet so I could get his rabies done, which then, oh yeah, go ahead and do a heartworm test while you're there. Well, I didn't heartworm positive. And it turned into this cascading thing, which is why I ended up keeping the dog, because I treated the heartworm and whatever else. But it was all just to get a haircut and make him look better. That's what I was going for. But, I would guess that, to me, if the groomer doesn't ask any questions about my pet's history or health and just makes the appointment and wants to know if it's got its vaccines, then that might not be the one that's really focusing on their health. They're more focusing on a haircut.
Absolutely.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think that would be, I would definitely be a red flag to me if I called to book a grooming appointment and all they wanted to know was, are they up to date on vaccines? And also even, what type of haircut you want. Those two, yeah, of course, that's important information. But typically, a sign of a good groomer when you're booking that first appointment is, how often does your dog typically get groomed? And, does he have any past injuries? And is there anything that you need us to be aware of for this appointment? Those types of things. Asking some more clarifying questions helps the groomer be able to customize that experience for that pet rather than just treating them like every other pet that walks through the door. So having a groomer that's willing to investigate and take a little bit of time to speak with the pet parent and kind of figure out what works best for that pet and what that pet parent's vision is, that's a sign that your groomer is really invested in delivering a quality experience for both the pet parent and the pet during the service.
Yeah, that's good to know. So in going into let's talk a little bit about this time of year and going into the holidays. Now, I'm in Houston today. It is 81 degrees. So we don't, not that it doesn't get cold here. It can get cold here, but I know for a lot of people that are listening, it's starting to get colder. In many places, the air is going to be drier. Does winter weather or fall weather impact our pets in some specific way we should be more aware of as far as their skin, their coat, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, full disclosure, I am San Diego born and raised. So, I also
you don't winter either.
I also don't. Yeah, we really don't have much winter out here. But yes, there are absolutely some implications here. The first is going to be the dry weather, like you said. Skin and coat does get a little bit more dry, and so we want to kind of make sure that we're doing a lot of conditioning, and whether that is, as the pet parent at home, using one of those nice leave-in conditioner sprays while I'm brushing, and maybe doing that once or twice a week more than usual during the winter months will help. And then during the actual bathing process as well, we can use a really cool method called close, open, close, which is where we start using conditioner on the dog and then we shampoo and then we conditioner again. And that really helps just kind of deliver a maximum level of moisture and really kind of revitalize the skin and coat. So always love doing that on the pets during winter as well. A hot oil treatment is another really, really great kind of add-on treatment that you can do during the winter.
They have that for dogs?
Yes, and it's great. It's my favorite. The pets love it. I talked with your groomer about it, but basically they soak in the conditioner with a nice hot towel wrapped around them for 10 minutes, and that dilates the pores, allowing them to absorb as much moisture as possible. It also helps kind of soothe arthritis, aches, and pain, which sometimes tends to get a little bit. We see that a little bit more during the cold winter months as well. Our pets are a little bit more achy, so hot oil treatment's kind of like a perfect killing two birds with one stone. The pets fall asleep during it. I love taking pictures of dogs during their hot oil treatments. It's great.
Really like a spa. It's not just going to get a haircut.
No, not at all. It's a whole spa treatment. So I love doing those kind of little extra services for pets during the winter time. Another thing to be aware of in the snowy areas is those snowballs that get stuck on our dog's long fur. I have seen using a whisk on the snowballs helps kind of break them off. So a lot of people are like, do I use a brush? Like, what do I use? I've got these snowballs all over my dog. So a whisk helps to kind of break them up. You just kind of brush it against your dog and that'll break the snowballs off. So that's one kind of little tip that I like. But when it comes to your dog's paws during winter time, a lot of times the dogs will get snowballs kind of stuck to their feet. And so trimming the fur in between their toes on the tops is great to kind of help with that. But I personally am not a huge fan of shaving the paw pads all the way out during winter time, because that leaves them exposed to the really, really cold ground and the salt that can be on the ground from a lot of places.
So I was going to ask you about salt, because I would hope most people who walk their dogs in more city environments are aware of, the impact of having salt on their feet. But I mean, is it as simple as rinsing their feet off when you get home, or what's the best way to deal with that if you don't have any choice but to walk where it's been salted?
Yeah. Washing their feet off at home with some nice warm water is always a good option. But honestly, whether it's a salted area or a non-salted area, if you can find a way to walk with your dog in boots, that's going to be the best option no matter what. If your dog can tolerate wearing some boots, it's going to be the best level of protection for them. But for those pets that don't really like it, you can kind of trim the fur so that it's shorter, but leaving a little bit on the actual bottom of the paw pad, leaving that fur to grow out a little bit will help protect the skin, and so that way they're stepping kind of on their fur on the ground rather than their bare skin. So a lot of times we scoop out the paw pads, get them real short so that there's no debris in there, and that's great. But I think during the winter months, leaving it a little bit longer so they have a little bit more cushion is going to be helpful. So a little bit of layer of protection for them there. But again, yes, you should always, if your dog is going to be walking out where there's salt, you should rinse their paws when they get home with just some nice warm water, maybe some warm soapy water, dry them off. But boots are always going to be the best option.
Yeah, and that's another thing that, some dogs are going to tolerate that, and some dogs are going to need to have some acclimation to wearing those boots. So don't wait until the 2 feet of snow is outside.
Exactly. Yep, absolutely. Start in summer,
there you go.
Make it fun, and you can make it a fun training activity for them, incorporate some games into it. But yeah, probably don't wait until the snow's already sticking.
Yeah, good point. So I would assume that the holidays get extra busy. So what would be some good planning tips for somebody, even if I do fairly regularly go to the groomer, should I be booking now for Christmas, or how does that usually work?
Absolutely. So just in general, right now, there are more dogs than dog groomers in the United States. That's just that is a fact. So it is hard to get a grooming appointment anyways right now, right? We see a lot of people are having trouble. If you call to book an appointment, a lot of people are booked out 2 weeks. Some people aren't taking new clients. It is only going to be worse during the holidays. So I always recommend to my clients, like as soon as they can possibly book their appointment, book it for the holidays, both your Thanksgiving and your Christmas time grooms. I will recommend on January 1st, if you know your schedule that far in advance.
I mean, when the holiday is going to be. Why is it such a surprise? Like Christmas doesn't sneak up on you, Hanukkah, whatever you're grooming for. You should be able to look at a calendar and know when that's coming. So
Absolutely.
Don't wait till the last minute.
Yeah, and it's always better to book in advance, and then if you need to reschedule, that's fine. At least you have an appointment slot reserved, right? So it's always better to book as soon as possible. Honestly, right now, if you haven't booked your holiday appointments, call your groomer, call them immediately, because people are already starting to get booked. So generally speaking, like looking ahead to next year, I would go ahead and book my Thanksgiving and Christmas appointments at the start of the summer, if I could. That's kind of like, just make sure that I have all of that time, because we do get plenty of calls, and people are going to be getting turned away, unfortunately, and then that leaves you in a position where you may have to go to a groomer you don't want to go to, or you may have to be doing some grooming at home, things like that. So I always recommend, start of the summer, go ahead and book your holiday appointments if you know your schedule that far in advance, because it gets extremely busy.
Yeah, you got to think about it just like, for getting your own hair done, or, things that it's going to be busy at the holidays. Everybody wants everybody to look good, and that dog is not going to look good if you're doing your own home haircut.
Exactly.
For the Christmas cards. Buddy's going to have to be left out of the picture.
Yep, exactly. And nobody wants that, so.
Yeah. So just to kind of wrap up this holiday discussion, any thoughts as far as, if kind of looking at it 2 ways, if I was going to get some grooming items for my pet, obviously I'm the one that's going to be using them, or maybe giving a gift to somebody that's got a dog, what would be some good things that you think people might appreciate at this time of year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one thing that's pretty much applicable to any type of breed of dog that somebody has could be one of those conditioning and scissoring sprays, or
Mm,
conditioning spray, dematting spray, leave-in conditioner, those types of products. Anything that's going to be sprayed onto the coat. That'll work great for your Labrador. That'll work great for a Doodle. Now, of course, there are products that are specifically formulated for certain coat types, and
right.
you're welcome to evaluate that. But generally speaking, a spray is always great, and that'll help with shedding for your lab. It'll help with dematting for your doodles. It'll help them smell nice, look shiny, feel nice and soft, right? So that's a really
Hmm.
easy one. There's plenty of products out there. We love the Hydra line at Well Groomed Pets. So there is a Hydra dematting spray that we swear by, that we love. And you can use it on cats too. So
Mm.
caveat with the spray, a lot of those sprays can't be used on cats because they do lick and groom themselves. So make sure if you're going to be using it on cats that, you read the fine print there. Hydra is safe for cats, but just in case there's any cat people on here listening.
Okay.
Other great tools, the slicker brush and comb. I mean, that is a doodle or any, poodle mixes, your Shih Tzus, any long hair breed. Those are amazing tools, and you can kind of invest as much as you want in them from a cost perspective. So you can get a metal comb and a slicker brush that are, $15 each or so, and this has some really, really great tools. Or if you want to go luxurious, you could get a Chris Christensen slicker brush. Those
Mm.
are a dream for doodle. Oh my gosh, I can't even. But they are
How
like
good of a
65.
friend are you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're expensive and they are professional. They are our favorite tools as groomers, these Chris Christensen slicker brushes. So if you're looking for luxury, you could go Chris Christensen slicker brush. There's also Greyhound metal combs. Again, that would be kind of more the luxury line if you really, really love your groomer friend. Aside from that, though, there's also the Zoom Groom brush, which is like a little rubber curry comb. Those work great on short-coated dogs like French Bulldogs and Pugs and things like
Oh
that.
yeah.
It's a really soft little brush that helps kind of remove all that dead coat. Those are very affordable. I believe they're about $15 or so. You can get those on Amazon too. So I think those are some good ones. My last one that I will say is for my double coated breeds. So anything from a lab to a husky. The Andis de-shedding rakes are God's gift to groomers and God's gift to shedding
Good to
dogs.
know.
They are amazing. The Andis fine tooth de-shedding rake is like my favorite tool on the market. So those tools work amazing. They're really great for maintenance, really gentle with the skin and coat. And so those are just a few products that might help kind of based off of different coat types. So
Great.
those are great. And then one more product that I will say, if your pet is having has any sort of anxiety related to grooming, then
Mhm.
using a lick mat is always
I was
great
just
during
thinking of
grooming.
that. I was going to add that at the end, but
You
you
were
beat me to
waiting
the
there for
punch.
me, right? Yeah. So a lick mat is kind of like a little silicone mat that you can apply peanut butter or cheese whiz or whatever your pup likes, and they can lick that during the grooming process. And then there's also different types of pheromone sprays that can be super helpful for dogs that get a little bit more stressed out during the grooming process or during car rides or things like that too. So I like to use Adaptil. There's a few
Hmm.
different brands out there, but basically it's a pheromone that's synthesized from the mother dog. So it's a really, really soothing kind of pheromone that helps just kind of helps take the edge off for pets, helps them relax. You just kind of spray it on a bandana and then put the bandana on them, spray it on a blanket that they're going to be nearby, things like that. So that helps a lot with some of the pets that need just a little bit of extra comfort and support to help them relax during the grooming process.
Yeah, good point. And I would assume too that if it's something where, let's say I acquire this, like Buddy, the original
Mm-hmm.
dog. He
Yeah.
he was totally cool with being at the groomer that time that he went. But let's just say it was a much more anxious dog. But at some point, like you said, I mean, the health of the animal, if the animal's really,
Yeah.
really mad, those mats need to come off. I would assume a consultation with your veterinarian about other possibilities, whether it's medication or something to relax them even beyond what the Adaptil might be able to do is probably a good idea.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of stigma and a lot of back and forth, honestly, between even groomers about the use of pre-visit pharmaceuticals for grooming. So,
Yeah.
giving your pet some form of sedative or something to help take the edge off before grooming. There's a lot of opinions, and it's a very charged topic. And so I always love talking about it because I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding. So you can take your dog to the vet and have them fully sedated for a grooming session. And, that maybe for the Cujos out there, the truly dangerous dogs out there, that
Right.
individuals that we cannot get through the groom safely, either for the dog or the groomer, they can be fully sedated. So that's something that happens under the care of a veterinarian. But there are also these pre-visit pharmaceuticals that we can use as training tools. So I think that's kind of where the confusion begins, is these pre-visit pharmaceuticals are not a solution to the problem. They're not a sedative so that the dog is sedated enough for me to be able to get through this. It's a training tool. So we use it to counter condition, essentially, the pet's experience. So if I am on a sedative or something that, an anti-anxiety med, something maybe like trazodone, when I come into the grooming session and I'm a little bit more relaxed throughout this process thanks to this medication, well, that's a new picture for me. I went through this grooming process and I was relaxed, and we can build on that. And so it really, really helps. Like, for example, I have used this countless times on dogs for 4 to 6 sessions. And then by the 7th session, we start weaning off the medication and the dog doesn't need it for the rest of its life. So there are certain outlier dogs that, whether they had an extremely traumatic experience or maybe they are just an extremely strong personality, they may need those pre-visit pharmaceuticals for, the duration of the time that they're getting groomed. And that's okay for those certain dogs. But most of the time, it's something that we use over the course of maybe 6 months to a year to help kind of counter condition this previous association that I had with grooming. And this is what I thought grooming was before. The groomer tries to touch me. I don't want her to touch me, so I bite her. Well, now I'm going to change the picture and kind of help use that anti-anxiety medication to create a more positive experience for the pet, and then they won't need it anymore. So it's a phenomenal option. It is absolutely something that you discuss with your veterinarian. They will help with the, prescribing the dosage and things like that. And it's also a time for the groomer and the veterinarian to work together as well. So, the groomer should be communicating with the pet parent or the veterinarian about how the pet did during their session, so that if the medication needs to be increased or decreased or changed, sometimes they'll have you give your pet a dose like the night before in addition to the morning of. So it's very much a collaborative process for those types of pets, but it can be extremely helpful, and it's not necessarily something that they'll need for the rest of their lives. If you work with your groomer and you're willing to bring them in regularly for 6 months to a year to help with this counter conditioning process, they can go, the rest of their lives happily enjoying grooming.
Yeah. And basically reap all the benefits of having that done without the anxiety.
Absolutely.
So that's,
absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I think, just drawing more awareness to the fact that it's become very, very common for our pets to be more like our children nowadays. And that's great. That's amazing. I fully support that. But we also have to recognize that they are still animals that have their own wants, their own needs, their own feelings, and their feelings are valid. There's no reason that their feelings aren't valid. So if your dog is struggling with grooming, if your dog doesn't want something done to it, we have to be respectful of that, whatever the reason for that feeling, and learn what we can do to change that feeling, either as the pet parent or as the groomer or as the veterinarian, as the vet tech. It's our responsibility to understand this pet that we're caring for and try to accommodate them, because we can't use words, right? So just bringing an awareness to the fact that that's its own little creature that has its own feelings, and it's my responsibility to care for them and to make sure that I'm protecting them in every way. I think it's easy to kind of forget that sometimes, as both as pet parents and as pet professionals, and these guys, they need us, and we are their strongest advocate. And so just bringing a little bit of patience and awareness into that situation, whether it's, my dog going to the groomer, my dog going to the vet, or, my dog being obnoxious when I have a bunch of friends over, whatever it may be, they are entitled to their own feelings, and it's our responsibility to advocate for them and try our best to accommodate them.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I see people trying to talk their way through some of these kind of scenarios, whether it's fear at the vet, fear of a trainer, fear of, whatever it might be. And it's like, you're not speaking their language when you're telling them, don't be scared, it's going to be fine, she's not going to hurt you. Like they're not going to process that, especially when you're saying it with angry tones, that you're annoyed that your dog's not cooperating. So excellent point and very well put. I appreciate that. So, Julia, thank you so much for being with us today. When we talked before, we were talking about doing multiple episodes on different topics, and I definitely want to have you back to do some other topics and dive into some of these things deeper. But I appreciate you trying to hit a little of like first time, repeat visits, the holidays. I'm going to squeeze all these into one episode just to give people, plenty of tools for their toolbox as they go into the holidays with their pets. So thank you for being so accommodating on that. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me and thank you for what you do. There is so much information out there for pet parents right now, and it can be kind of hard to weed through and find the really good resources. And so, thank you so much for what you're doing for this platform that, you're providing pet parents with this crucial information that's, kind of missing out there. So thank you as well for having me.
Sure, I appreciate it. And we'll put links up in our show notes, to the Well Groomed website so that people, if they're looking for that combination of, grooming knowledge and wellness knowledge that you might not be able to find elsewhere, we can definitely send them in the direction of Well Groomed. And maybe you can send me some links to some of the products that you mentioned, and I can put those up in the show notes. Absolutely. And then I can go to Andis and be like, hey, you need to be doing some ads on my show after we mentioned you 500 times.
Yep, absolutely.
Just kidding. But no, we can put some links up there so people can get directly to those products that you mentioned. Because what it got me thinking about was we're in the process of cleaning. We're in a cleaning mode right now around here. And I have a grooming box. And in that grooming box, I kid you not, were at least 8 or 9 different combs. This is just my personal pets. This isn't even the rescue grooming box. And it's like, where did all these come from? I have no idea which ones are good, which ones work. So it's, to know that you're going to get yourself a nice set of the appropriate tools for your pet that are proven to work by groomers who use them every single day. That saves you so much time and money in wasting money on things that aren't going to work. So those links would be super helpful.
Yeah, no problem. I'll send those over.
Awesome. All right. Well, and thank you to everybody for listening to another episode of Starlight Pet Talk. Again, use this advice for your own pets. Share this episode with your friends who have pets, especially those ones that have doodles and other things that can be hard to groom. And hopefully they'll pull some tips that will make their life and their pet's life a lot easier. And we will see you next episode.